This session, I will be covering of what I am going to discuss in week 2 of the corporate valuation subject. As is discussed in week 1 of the enterprise discount cash flow model, which involves 5 steps in valuing the firm, like analyzing historical performance, estimating the cost of capital, forecasting performance, and determining the continuing value and calculating the firm value and interpreting the results. I will be taking up few numerical problems as a part of practical components for your better understanding. In this sense, I will be discussing about how to calculate ROIC, how to calculate NOPLAT, how to calculate operating invested capital, how to calculate net investment, free cash flow to the firm, and the cash flow available to investors. And also I will be throwing light on getting a perspective on drivers of free cash flow. So in the first step, that is analyzing historical performance, to understand how the company has performed in the past, which provides a good foundation for forecasting its future. An analysis of historical performance is usually done in valuing a business as a first step. Financial statements that the accountants prepare are not designed with valuation in mind, and hence it is necessary to rework with them to sharpen the focus on the company's economic performance, which calls for reorganizing the financial statements to get handle over economic performance instead of accounting performance, that is, in terms of net operating profit less adjusted taxes and free cash flow to the firm. NOPLAT, a term that is coined by McKinsey and Company, is more popularly referred to as net operating profit after tax. And also we have to find out and discuss what are the drivers of free cash flow and how to measure and analyze the return on invested capital to assess the ability of the company for creating value and decomposing revenue growth into various components, then assessing the company's financial health and its capital structure. So with an example of Matrix Limited, we will discuss the historical performance analysis, and I will be exhibiting the profit and loss account and balance sheet in my regular class. For reorganizing the accounting statements will emphasize on profit after tax, return on assets, return on equity, cash flow from operations, and net change in cash and cash equivalents. And these measures will reflect the combined effect of operating items, non-operating items, and capital structure. But for a proper understanding of historical performance, what is required is we have to separate operating performance from non-operating items and capital structure. In order to do this, the accounting statements has to be reorganized to get a handle over operating invested capital, NOPLAT, ROIC, net investment, and free cash flow, which is dealt in detail in the class. So how to calculate operating invested capital? The capital that is provided by shareholders and lenders is invested in operating assets and non-operating assets. Operating invested capital consists of net fixed assets deployed in the operations of the firm as well as operating working capital, which is operating working assets minus non-interest bearing current liabilities. Operating invested capital can be obtained by deducting non-operating fixed assets like surplus land and excess cash and marketable securities from total assets in the balance sheet. To calculate NOPLAT, which stands for net operating profits less adjusted taxes, which is equal to EBIT less taxes on EBIT. EBIT is nothing but the pre-tax operating income the firm would have earned if it had no debt. To calculate EBIT, we have to exclude interest expenses, interest income, and non-operating income. And taxes on EBIT will represent the tax the firm would pay if it had no debt, excess marketable securities, or non-operating income or loss. And taxes on EBIT is calculated by adjusting the income tax provision for the income tax attributable to interest expense, interest and dividend income from excess marketable securities and non-operating income. And hence, by doing such operations, we will arrive at NOPLAT. Return on invested capital is defined as NOPLAT by invested capital multiplied by 100 to arrive in terms of percentage, and invested capital is usually measured at the beginning of the year or as the average at the beginning and end of the year. While calculating ROIC, we have to define the numerator and denominator consistently. That is, if an asset is included in invested capital, income related to it should be included in NOPLAT for achieving consistency. ROIC will focus on true operating performance of the firm, and it is a better measure compared to return on equity and return on assets. Why? Because return on equity will reflect operating performance as well as financial structure, and return on assets is internally inconsistent. And hence ROIC is the true operating reflects as the true operating performance of the firm. To calculate net investment, it is the difference between gross investment and the depreciation. And gross investment is calculated as the sum of incremental outlays on capital expenditures and net current assets. Depreciation refers to non-cash charges, and hence net investment is calculated by adding and deducting the net fixed assets at the end of the year and net current assets at the end of the year, less net fixed assets at the beginning of the year and net current assets at the beginning of the year. And next, we will be calculating the free cash flow, which is the post cash flow generated from the operations of the firm after providing for investments in fixed assets and net current assets required for the operations of the firm, which is expressed as NOPLAT less net investment, or which can be rewritten as NOPLAT plus depreciation less net investment plus depreciation, which can also be written as gross cash flow minus gross investment. The cash flow available to investors is equal to free cash flow plus non-operating cash flow. Non-operating cash flows arises from non-operating items like sale of assets, restructuring and settlement of disputes, and such items of course has to be adjusted for taxes. Cash flow available to investors is also viewed as the financing flow, and that can be derived by adding and deducting the following things like after-tax interest expense and cash dividend on equity and preference shares should be added. Redemption of debt, redemption of preference shares, share buybacks, any excess marketable securities, all these has to be added, and after adding this, we have to deduct new borrowings, share issues and after-tax income on excess marketable securities to arrive at the financing flow. After arriving at operating invested capital, ROIC, net investment, no flat, and the cash flow available to investors, we will be interested in knowing which are the key drivers of the free cash flow. And the key drivers of the free cash flow are the invested capital, ROIC, growth rate, and net investment. So after solving few problems for better understanding of reorganizing the historical statement or the accounting statement, then we will look at decomposing the revenue growth. For decomposing the revenue growth, we will begin with looking at the year-to-year reported revenue growth for the past 3 to 5 years. Next, we will be decomposing the reported revenue growth into organic revenue growth, acquisitions and divestitures, currency effects, changes in accounting policies. We will be interested in solving a few numerical problems using two-stage and three-stage growth model for arriving at the value of the firm. Then we will be interested in understanding the equity discounted cash flow model as well. Where under equity discounted cash flow model, there are two variants of the equity discounted cash flow model, the dividend discount model and the free cash flow to equity model. The dividend discount model discounts the expected dividend stream at the cost of equity. The free cash flow to equity model discounts the free cash flow to equity at the cost of equity. Though the enterprise DCF model is the standard DCF model which is used commonly in valuation practice, its principal advantage is that it incorporates the costs and benefits of borrowing in an easily understandable manner. The impact of changes in financial leverage on firm can be readily examined with the help of enterprise DCF model. But it suffers with some problems like it is easier to understand the free cash flows to equity rather than free cash flows to the firm. When we are asked to define cash flows, we tend to think like owners and look at cash flows after debt-related payments, that is interest as well as principal. That is, equity cash flows make more sense to us than compared to firm's cash flows. The focus of enterprise cash flows on pre-debt cash flows can sometimes hide the problem of potential financial distress. For example, a firm may have a free cash flow to the firm of Rs 50 million but may have a debt serving burden of Rs 150 million. To survive, it will have to raise 100 million of new financing. which is a problem that is highlighted by the free cash flow to equity, not by the free cash flow to the firm. Also, the calculation of weighted average cost of capital calls for making implicit assumptions that may not be reasonable. For example, an assumption that the market value debt ratio is 40%, which means a growing firm will have to issue large amount of debt in future years to maintain this ratio, which implies that the book value debt ratio may become unreasonably high. Due to these problems, valuation practitioners sometimes value equity directly, employing either the dividend discount model or the free cash flow to equity model. Since equity shares have no maturity period, they may be expected to bring a dividend stream of infinite duration. Hence, we have to find out the value of an equity share by discounting the cash flows, that is the dividends, as well as at the required rate of return or the cost of equity. So there are various variants of dividend discounts model. The dividend per share remains constant forever, which implies that growth rate is nil, which is considered a zero growth model. The dividend per share grows at a constant rate per year forever, which is the constant growth model. The dividend per share grows at a constant rate for a finite period, followed by a constant normal rate of growth forever thereafter, which is called as a two-stage growth model, and the dividend per share currently growing at an above normal rate, which experiences a linearly declining rate of growth for a while. Thereafter, it grows at a constant normal rate, which is called as the H model, will be discussed in detail with illustration for each model, and hence arriving at the value of the share under all these models. And also we will discuss about the applicability of the dividend discount model. Some proponents like Benjamin Graham School of Investing swear by the dividend discount model, that is, they go by the dividend discount model. Others, they will consider it too narrow. There are some advantages of dividend discount model, like it is simple and appealing. The dividends are the only cash flows that the shareholders receive from the firm, and fewer assumptions are required to forecast dividends than to forecast free cash flows. Dividend forecast can be obtained by applying growth rate estimate to dividend paid last year, and firms generally pursue a smoothing dividend policy. Hence, while a company's earnings and reinvestments are volatile, dividends are more predictable. So, a valuation based on dividends tend to be more stable than a valuation based on cash flows, which are few advantages or few benefits of using dividend discount model, but however it suffers from a serious limitation because it equates dividends into cash flows. But in real world, many firms hold back substantial cash flows which they can otherwise pay out as dividends. As a result, they have a large buildup of cash balances. While shareholders cannot directly claim these cash balances, they have an ownership stake in these cash balances. So, equity value should reflect these claims. Such firms tend to be undervalued by this model, that is, dividend discount model. At the other end, there are some firms that pay dividends in excess of their cash flows. Obviously they have to bridge the gap with new debt or equity shares. Such firms tend to be overvalued by the dividend discount model. One more variant of equity DCF model is free cash flow to equity model. where the free cash flow to equity is the cash flow left for equity shareholders after the firm has covered its capital expenditure and working capital needs and met all its obligations towards lenders and preferred shareholders. Free cash flow to equity is defined with a formula which will be explained in the class later. And this model can be viewed as an extension of dividend discount model in which we discount potential dividends instead of actual dividends. And this model implicitly assumes that the free cash flow to equity will be paid out to shareholders, which means there will be no surplus cash built up with the firm. So the expected growth rate in this model will reflect only growth in income from operating assets. This model also views the shareholders in a publicly traded firm like the owners of a private business who can claim all cash flow available in the firm after meeting taxes, debt-related payments, and reinvestment needs. Essentially, the free cash flow model, when applied to a listed company, assumes that there is an excellent corporate governance system in place. Even if managers do not pay the entire free cash flow to equity as dividends, they ensure that the cash that is held back is not deployed economically. Also, we will be discussing of adjusted present value model where as enterprise DCF model uses a constant discount rate to value the enterprise cash flows, which makes sense when the capital structure of a firm remains more or less constant over time. But in situations in which the capital structure of the firm is likely to substantially change over time, the most suitable method is the adjusted present value method. And the adjusted present value method defines enterprise value as the sum of two components, that is, value of unlevered equity free cash flows and value of the interest tax shields. The first component, that is value of unlevered equity free cash flows, is the present value of the firm's operating cash flows. Since the operating cash flows do not depend on how the firm is financed, they may be referred to as unlevered equity free cash flows. And the second component of the enterprise value, that is value of interest tax shields, is the present value of the interest tax shield arising from the use of debt financing. We decompose the enterprise value by finding out the present value of the unlevered equity free cash flows and the present value of the interest tax shields, and this approach captures easily the impact of the changing capital structure. And this adjusted present value model is typically implemented using a procedure that we follow for estimating the enterprise value using the weighted average cost of capital approach, wherein the enterprise value was estimated as the sum of the present value of the free cash flow during the planning period, that is the explicit forecast period, and the present value of the estimated terminal value at the end of the planning period. We consider few steps in implementing the adjusted present value approach for arriving at the value of the firm. That is, the first step in APV approach is to estimate the present value of cash flows during the planning period, which is discussed in detail while solving the problems. We also will estimate the present value of unlevered equity free cash flow during the planning period and the present value of the interest tax shield during the planning period. And as a step 2, we will estimate the terminal value of the firm at the end of the planning period, and we will add the present values of cash flows arrived in step 1 and step 2 to find out the value of the firm. An illustration will be explained in detail. How the adjusted present value works will be explained in detail by taking an illustration. So thus, in this week 2, we will be discussing on two numerical problems on reorganizing the accounting statements and finding out operating invested capital, net investment, ROIC, free cash flow to the firm, growth rate, and also the cash flows available to the investors, which is very important in finding out the value of the firm rather than the accounting profit and loss account and income statement, which is not so clear for finding out or for determining the free cash flows to the firm in future. We also will discuss two approaches to valuation, that is equity DCF model, where this equity DCF model is divided into two variants, that is the dividend discount model and free cash flow to equity model. Also, we will discuss one more variant or one more approach, which is called as non-DCF approach to valuation, that is adjusted present value method, where it involves 3 steps in valuation. Coming to the applicability of the DCF analysis, the DCF method, it requires credible estimates of future cash flows and discount rates. It is easily applicable to assets and firms when current cash flows are positive, future cash flows are estimated easily and reliably, and the risk profile is stable. If it is removed from the ideal settings, the more difficult it is to apply the DCF approach. Some of the situations where applicability of DCF approach is difficult and it is necessary to make substantial modification to the DCF method are firms which are in distress, firms which have highly cyclical operations, firms with substantial unlisted assets, firms with significant patents and product options, firms which are under restructuring, firms involved in acquisitions, private firms. So these are some of the situations where it is difficult to apply the DCF method, or we have to make a substantial modification in applying this model. DCF approach suffers from limitations also. So to understand, we have to look at where it is helpful and where it is not helpful. Like DCF is the standard for valuing fixed income securities. It can be easily used for valuing safe cash flows, such as cash flows of financial leases. It can be sensibly used for valuing stocks of mature companies which pays regular dividends. It can be readily applied for valuing cash cows. It works well for engineering investments like replacement projects. It is not very useful in valuing stocks of companies which have substantial growth opportunities. It can be never used for valuing call and put options. These are valued using option pricing model, which is very different from DCF model. Even it doesn't doesn't make any sense valuing R&D projects, and valuation of R&D projects is represented by its option value. It is not also helpful in valuing a business with significant growth or intangible assets. That is, it provides only a partial answer when options account for a significant portion of the value of a firm. So we will discuss in the second week of this 5 sessions in detail the different models and also the numerical problems under each module. Thank you.